I never thought I'd be afraid of my own family. My daughter-in-law held a secret over my head for years, using it to abuse me and control my life. The breaking point came on a freezing Tuesday night when she threw me out of my own house into -10-degree weather, and my eldest son told me to leave. I was ready to give up, but fate had other plans. My younger son arrived that night, and the war for my home and my dignity officially began. They tell you to live for the American dream, and for most of my life I truly believed I was living it. My husband, bless his heart, worked his tail off to get us this big, beautiful split-level house in the suburbs. White picket fence, the whole 9 yards. It was everything to me. It was my castle. I was a mother of 2 wonderful boys. My oldest, Robert, we called him Rob, was a good kid, ambitious, always chasing success. And then there was my youngest, Ethan, always the thoughtful one. After their dad passed, these boys were my entire world. My everything. But sometimes, your world gets turned on its head by something you never saw coming. A tiny little crack that appears in the glass, and before you know it, the whole thing shatters. That crack? It walked into my house about 5 years ago, wearing a stunning ivory dress and a smile that could fool the devil himself. Rob brought her home and he was smitten. Head over heels. Her name was Tiffany. She was polished. She looked like she stepped right off a magazine cover. A true blonde bombshell, sharp as a tack and quick with a compliment. She was a total sweetheart in front of Rob, always calling me Mom, asking for my recipes. I remember thinking, finally my boy is settling down. My family is complete. I was such a sap. I didn't see it then, but she wasn't looking for a family. She was looking for a situation. And she was absolutely playing the long game. For months she was perfect. Then the little things started. A roll of the eyes when I talked about politics. A sharp tone when Rob wasn't around. Little jabs I ignored, telling myself I was being too sensitive. We all have those moments, right? I just figured she had a bit of a diva side. But this wasn't a diva. This was a predator. Every life has a skeleton in the closet. A secret you wish you could burn out of existence. Mine was decades old. A terrible, reckless mistake I made when I was just a naive girl, heartbroken and desperate. It was something that, if it ever came out, wouldn't just be embarrassing. It would redefine everything my boys thought they knew about me, about their dad, and about the very foundation of our family name. I thought I had buried it deep, locked it away in an old bank box, where only the memory remained. But I was foolish. I'd kept a small private diary, tucked away in the very back of a cedar chest in the attic. Tiffany was cleaning the attic one rainy afternoon. She claimed she found it by accident. I think she was snooping. She was looking for the goods. She found it. The whole messy, ugly truth, written in my teenage handwriting. The next morning I was making coffee. She walked in, not with her usual high-pitched "Good morning, Mom," but with a voice that was low, flat, and colder than a January blizzard. "Eleanor," she said, using my full name, something she never did. "We need to have a little chat about your past. It looks like you have a bit of a shady history." That was it. The charm was gone. I was staring at a stranger. A blackmailer. The words she spoke were the locks on my cage. "If you ever, and I mean ever, try to put me down to Rob, if you hint that I'm anything less than a saint, I will fax copies of this entire diary to every relative, every friend, and every single one of Rob's business partners. Your perfect little family life? Toast. And Rob? He will despise the ground you walk on." I was paralyzed. I was staring down the barrel of a gun, and the bullet was aimed right at my son's respect for me. I couldn't risk it. So I zipped my mouth. My silence became her absolute authority. She didn't have to pretend anymore. The subtle dismissals turned into open, venomous cruelty. She'd say things like, "Oh, are you sure you need that third coffee, Eleanor? Don't want your senior moment coming early today, do we?" Right in front of me in my own kitchen. The emotional abuse was relentless, but the physical threats were worse. The first truly terrible thing happened on a Tuesday. I tried to argue with her over some bills, trying to be firm, trying to stand up for myself just a little bit. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She just gave me that dead-eyed stare. And then when Rob left for work, she acted. She locked me in my own bedroom closet. I pleaded. I rattled the handle. Nothing. Silence. I was in there for over 15 hours. I missed my meds, I was starved, and the sheer humiliation was worse than the hunger. If I yelled and neighbors called the police, I'd have to explain. And then, the secret would be public record. When Rob came home and finally let me out, Tiffany was sitting calmly on the sofa, scrolling on her phone, looking like the picture of a devoted wife. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. Mom, what was with the noise? Tiffany said you were having one of your episodes. You need to chill out. You know she has a stressful job. He blamed me. He believed her lie, that I was being dramatic and hysterical, trying to ruin his peace. All I could manage to whisper through trembling lips was, "I'm sorry, son. It won't happen again." The worst night, the night that truly broke me, was in the dead of winter. It was one of those Midwest cold snaps, the kind where the air feels like glass and bites deep into your marrow. It started with a serious argument. Tiffany had accused me of purposely destroying an expensive watch she had bought for Rob. I hadn't touched it, but she was screaming, making a huge scene, calling me jealous and destructive. I couldn't take it anymore. I snapped. I started yelling back, defending myself, telling her she was a liar. The noise brought Rob running downstairs. He stood there, looking between the two of us. Tiffany instantly started crying, fake crocodile tears rolling down her cheeks. "Rob, I can't live like this. She's trying to ruin everything. She hates me." I looked at my son, desperate for him to defend me. "Rob, please, she's lying. I didn't touch anything." Rob rubbed his temples, looking exhausted and annoyed. He didn't look at the evidence. He looked at me with pure frustration. "Mom, stop it," he yelled. "Just stop. You are behaving very odd lately. You're paranoid, you're yelling. I can't deal with this right now. I have a presentation in the morning." "But Rob." "No," he cut me off. "I don't want to hear it. You need to cool down. Honestly, Mom, just go out and have some fresh air. Get away from us for a minute." With that, he turned his back on me and stormed off to his room, slamming his bedroom door shut. I stood there, stunned. My son had just dismissed me like a nuisance. I turned to look at Tiffany. The tears were gone instantly. A cruel, twisted smile spread across her face. She walked over to the front door and yanked it open. The freezing wind howled into the hallway. "Well, Eleanor," she whispered. "You heard what he said. He said, go out and have some fresh air." "Tiffany, no, it's 10 degrees out there," I begged. "Get out," she hissed. She grabbed me by the shoulders and shoved me hard. I stumbled backward, tripping onto the icy porch. The door shut. The lock clicked. I was in my indoor clothes. No coat. No shoes. Just the biting wind and the snow. I pounded on the door, but not too loud. I was terrified Rob would come back down and think I was causing another scene. And then Tiffany would release the secret. I was trapped. The hopelessness was consuming me. I was ready to give up. I didn't know how much longer I could take it. I felt like I was running on fumes. But then the universe finally decided to throw me a bone. It was time for my second son, Ethan, to come home from New York. And everything was about to change. I was sitting on the concrete steps of the porch, huddled into a ball, trying to preserve whatever body heat I had left. The wind was relentless, cutting right through my thin sweater. My teeth were chattering so hard my jaw ached. I felt so small, so discarded. I remember looking at the moon and wondering if this was it. If I was just going to freeze to death right there on the doorstep of the house my husband built. Then lights swept across the lawn. A car engine purred into the driveway. It was late past midnight. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was Ethan. He was here. He stepped out of the car, looking tired from the travel, hoisting a duffel bag over his shoulder. He looked up and saw me. I'll never forget the look on his face. It wasn't just surprise, it was horror. He dropped his bag right there on the pavement and sprinted up the walkway. "Mom," he choked out. He knelt beside me, his hands warm on my freezing arms. "Mom, my God, you're like ice. What are you doing out here? Where is your coat?" I couldn't even speak. I was shaking too hard. He didn't wait for an answer. He stood up, his jaw set like stone, and he laid on that doorbell. He didn't just ring it, he held it down. A few moments later the lock turned. The door swung open and there stood Tiffany. She was wearing a plush robe, looking warm and cozy. When she saw Ethan, her eyes went wide for a fraction of a second, a deer in headlights, but then she flipped the switch. The mask slammed back into place. "Ethan!" she gasped, putting a hand to her chest. Then she looked down at me, feigning shock. "Eleanor? Oh my gosh, are you okay? Why were you sitting out here?" She bent down, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We had a little argument, sure, but I told you to just take a breather. You have to take care of yourself, Eleanor. It's freezing outside. Why didn't you just knock?" I stared at her, too weak to fight the lie. She was gaslighting me right in front of my savior. Ethan didn't yell. He didn't explode. He was surprisingly mature, almost scary in his calmness. He just looked at her, then looked down at me. He gently helped me to my feet, wrapping his heavy blazer around my shoulders. "Let's get you inside, Mom," he said softly. He walked right past Tiffany, barely acknowledging her existence. He guided me to the kitchen and sat me down at the island. I was still shivering. He immediately started bustling around, filling the kettle, getting a mug. Tiffany trailed behind us, hovering. "Ethan, really, let me do that," she said, reaching for the kettle. "You must be exhausted from your trip. Go take a rest. I'll make her some coffee and get her warmed up." Ethan stopped. He didn't turn around at first. He just held the kettle in midair. Then he slowly turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were cold. "It's okay, Tiffany," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it had a freezing tone that dropped the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. "I will take care of my mom. Now that I am home." The silence that followed was deafening. Tiffany stood there, her mouth slightly open. She wasn't used to being defied. She wasn't used to men in this house standing their ground. She forced a tight, awkward smile. "Suit yourself," she clipped. She turned on her heel and marched back upstairs to her room. Once she was gone, Ethan placed a steaming mug of coffee in front of me. He pulled up a stool and sat close, looking deep into my eyes. "Mom," he whispered. "What happened? And don't tell me it was just a walk. Tell me everything I need to know." I gripped the warm mug, feeling the heat seep into my frozen fingers. I wanted to tell him. The words were right there on the tip of my tongue. She locked me out. She threatens me daily. She knows my secret. But the fear paralyzed me. If I told him, he would confront her. If he confronted her, the secret would be out tomorrow. I couldn't risk him looking at me with disgust. It was nothing, honey," I lied, my voice trembling. "It was just a silly argument." I was a little angry and I stepped out to cool off, and I suppose I lost track of time. "I'm just getting old and foolish." He didn't say anything. He just watched me. He saw the way my hands shook. He saw the terror behind my eyes. He could feel my helplessness radiating off me like heat waves. He knew I was lying, but he didn't push. He just nodded slowly, accepting my silence for now. "Okay, Mom," he said gently. "Drink your coffee." The next morning, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Rob was at the dining table, rushing through his breakfast, scrolling on his tablet. Tiffany was nowhere to be seen. She was avoiding the morning crossfire. Ethan walked in looking fresh but serious. He poured himself a coffee and leaned against the counter, watching his brother. "We need to talk about last night," Ethan said bluntly. Rob didn't even look up. "What about it?" "I came home at midnight and found Mom freezing to death on the front porch," Ethan said. "She was blue, Rob. Literally blue." Rob let out a loud, exasperated sigh and finally put his tablet down. "Oh gosh. Here we go. Look, Ethan, Mom is behaving very ridiculously these days. She's having these episodes. Tiffany told me she just wandered out there to be dramatic after they had a spat." "Dramatic?" Ethan repeated, his voice rising slightly. "It was 10 degrees, Rob. She was locked out. Tiffany acted like she didn't even know she was there. Excuse me, but that is our mother. And I think Tiffany is being incredibly rude to her. Actually, worse than rude. She's cruel. Rob stood up, his face flushing red. He slammed his hand on the table. Hey, watch your mouth, Rob snapped. Tiffany is my wife. She does everything for this family. She takes care of Mom while I'm working my tail off to pay for this house. You just got back from New York, you drop in here and you think you understand the dynamic? You don't know the situation, Ethan. I know what I saw, Ethan shot back. I saw a scared old woman locked out of her own home. You saw what you wanted to see. Rob yelled. You're trying to stir up trouble. Mind your own business, Ethan. Seriously. If you're going to stay here, stay out of my marriage and stop indulging Mom's theatrics. I don't have time for this stupidity. Rob grabbed his briefcase and stormed out the door without saying goodbye. Ethan stood there in the silent kitchen. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked resolved. He watched Rob's car back out of the driveway. He realized then that he couldn't count on his brother. Rob was too blind, too manipulated. If my nightmare was going to end, Ethan realized he would have to be the one to end it. And he would have to do it alone. He took a sip of his coffee, pulled out his phone and opened a new note. He wasn't the little brother anymore. He was the detective. And the investigation had just officially begun. After that blow-up with Rob in the kitchen, Ethan changed his strategy completely. He realized that fighting with his brother was a dead end. Rob was too brainwashed, too deep in the fog of his happy marriage to see the reality. If Ethan kept pushing, he'd just get kicked out, and I would be left alone with the wolf again. So Ethan went quiet. He put on his game face. He started acting like everything was peachy. He apologized to Rob, told him he was just jet-lagged and stressed. He even brought Tiffany flowers one afternoon, playing the part of the apologetic brother-in-law. Tiffany soaked it up. She thought she had one. She thought she had put him in his place just like she had put me in mine. But she didn't know Ethan. She didn't know that behind that charming smile, his mind was working like a supercomputer. He had stopped being the brother. He had gone full Sherlock Holmes. He started observing. And I mean really observing. He became a fly on the wall. He noticed the patterns that Rob was too busy to see. He saw how my posture slumped the second Tiffany walked into a room. He saw the way I would freeze mid-sentence if she cleared her throat. He saw the subtle, nasty hand gestures she made at me when Rob's back was turned. One afternoon, I was folding laundry in the living room. Ethan was on the couch with his laptop, pretending to work. Tiffany walked by and whispered, loud enough for me to hear but too quiet for the next room. Move faster, old woman. You're cluttering up my space. I flinched and sped up. Ethan didn't look up from his screen, but I saw his jaw tighten. He typed a quick note on his phone. He was building a case. He was collecting receipts. A few days later, he came to me in the garden. He checked to make sure the windows were closed and Tiffany was out at her Pilates class. Mom, he said, keeping his voice low. I've been watching. And I've figured something out. You aren't just scared of her temper. You're scared of her mouth. I stopped pruning the roses. My heart started hammering. She has something on you, doesn't she? He asked. It wasn't really a question. That's why you take it. That's why you let her treat you like garbage. You're afraid she's going to spill some dirt. I couldn't look at him. I just stared at the thorns on the rosebush. It's okay, he soothed. You don't have to tell me what it is. I'm going to find it. And I'm going to fix it. He knew. He had cracked the code. He realized that this wasn't just a bad relationship. It was a hostage situation. The opportunity came that Thursday. Rob was at work, and Tiffany went out for a girls' lunch that usually lasted 3 hours. The house was empty. Ethan didn't waste a second. He knew Tiffany was possessive of her home office, a room she rarely let anyone enter. She kept it locked, claiming she had sensitive work documents in there. Even though she barely worked part-time, Ethan went straight for that door. I was terrified. Ethan, don't. If she comes back and finds you in there, she'll... She'll do it. She'll ruin everything. She won't know, he said calmly. He pulled a small toolkit out of his pocket. My son, the gentleman, apparently learned a few tricks in the city. He worked the lock with a precision that was almost scary. Click. The door swung open. He went inside. I stood guard in the hallway, sweating bullets, watching the driveway for her car. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. Ethan wasn't looking for money. He was looking for leverage. He went through her desk, her files, nothing. Then he found a small locked safe box tucked away on the top shelf of the closet, hidden behind some designer shoeboxes. He brought it down. He didn't have the combination, but he noticed something. The keypad was worn down on 4 specific numbers. Her birthday. Of course. He punched it in. The light turned green. He opened the box. And there it was. My old tattered diary. The one with the faded blue cover. The container of all my shame. I watched from the doorway as he picked it up. My breath caught in my throat. This was the moment I had dreaded for 5 years. My son was going to read about my past. He was going to know. He opened it to the page Tiffany had bookmarked with a sticky note. He started to read. I closed my eyes, waiting for the judgment. Waiting for him to slam the book shut and look at me with disgust. Waiting for him to say, "How could you, Mom?" The silence stretched on for an eternity. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I opened my eyes. Ethan was standing there. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disgusted. His eyes were filled with tears, but they were tears of sorrow and love. "Mom," he whispered, his voice shaking slightly. This is what she's been holding over you." I nodded, shame burning my cheeks. "Mom, this was 40 years ago," he said firmly. "You were a kid. You were in a bad situation. This doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human." He held up the diary. "She has been torturing you for 5 years over a mistake you made when you were 19? She used your vulnerability to enslave you." His expression shifted then. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard fury. It was the look of a judge delivering a final verdict. "She crossed the line," he said, closing the diary and gripping it tight. "She thinks this is her weapon? Well, she just handed me the ammo." He didn't put the diary back. He took it. He walked over to his laptop, scanned the pages, and then saved them to an encrypted drive. Then he looked at me. "We aren't putting this back," he said. "The blackmail ends today. She thinks she holds the keys to this family? She's about to find out that she's just been renting space." He checked his watch. "She'll be home in 20 minutes. Go wash your face, Mom. Put on your favorite dress. We aren't hiding anymore." I looked at him confused. "What are you going to do?" He gave me a grim smile. "I'm going to solve the problem. Like a gentleman." He had found the secret. He had secured the evidence. And for the first time in years, the fear in my chest began to loosen. The detective work was done. Now it was time for the execution. Before we dive into the explosive conclusion of this saga, please take a quick second to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us share these stories and support people going through similar situations. Now let's see how my sons finally brought the hammer down. Ethan told me to go upstairs and get ready. I went to my closet and pulled out my favorite navy blue dress, the one I hadn't worn since my husband's funeral. I applied a little lipstick, fixed my hair, and looked at myself in the mirror. For 5 years I had seen a victim staring back at me. A frightened, frail old woman. But today I saw a mother who had backup. I saw a survivor. I heard the front door open downstairs. The heavy thud of designer boots on the hardwood. Tiffany was home. I walked to the top of the stairs and just listened. The house was quiet. Way too quiet. Usually the TV would be blaring, or she'd be on the phone screaming at some customer service rep. But today there was a stillness that felt heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. Tiffany must have sensed it too. I heard her heels clicking rapidly toward her office. She was going to check on her leverage. It was her daily ritual, making sure her weapon was still loaded. A moment later I heard a sharp, strangled gasp. Then the frantic sound of papers being thrown, drawers being ripped open. She was panicking. She had opened the safe box and found nothing but air. Looking for this? I heard Ethan's voice float out from the living room. It was calm, smooth, and dangerous. I crept down the stairs, gripping the banister. Ethan was sitting in the high-back armchair, legs crossed, looking like the CEO of the universe. He was holding my old blue diary in his hand, flipping through it casually like it was a magazine in a dentist's waiting room. Tiffany stood in the doorway of her office, her face pale as a sheet, her hands trembling. "Give that back to me," she hissed, her voice shaking with a mix of rage and terror. "You have no right to touch my property. That is private property." Ethan laughed, a cold, dry sound that echoed off the walls. "This isn't your property, Tiffany. This is stolen goods. And using it to threaten an elderly woman? In the state of New York and pretty much everywhere else in this country, that's called extortion. It's a felony. And people go to jail for it for a very long time." Tiffany's eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an angle. She was a master manipulator, and I could see the gears turning in her head. "You think you're so smart, Ethan? You think you can protect her? You have no idea what's in there. Wait until Rob gets home. I'll tell him everything. I'll tell him his mother is a liar and a degenerate. I will ruin her reputation in this entire town." "Save your breath." Ethan cut her off, standing up slowly. He towered over her, his presence filling the room. "You think this diary is your ace in the hole? You think Rob cares about a mistake Mom made 40 years ago? A mistake made by a grieving, desperate teenager, more than he cares about his wife being a sociopath? You overplayed your hand, Tiffany. You bet the house and you lost." Just then the front door unlocked. The latch clicked and Rob walked in. He looked exhausted, carrying his briefcase, loosening his tie, completely unaware that he was walking into a crime scene. He stopped dead when he saw the tableau. His brother holding a book, his wife looking like a cornered animal, and his mother standing on the stairs. "What is going on here?" Rob asked, looking between Ethan and Tiffany. "Why is everyone standing around looking like someone died? Can I just get 5 minutes of peace?" Tiffany immediately burst into tears. It was an Oscar-worthy performance, truly. She ran over to Rob and grabbed his arm, burying her face in his shoulder. "Oh, Rob. Thank God you're home. It's Ethan. He broke into my office. He smashed the lock. He stole my personal things. He's been threatening me, Rob. He's trying to intimidate me. You have to kick him out right now." Rob looked at Ethan, his face hardening. The exhaustion turned into frustration. "Ethan, seriously? I told you to stay out of our business. You've been here 3 days and you're breaking into rooms? Give her back whatever you took." Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't yell. He just looked at his brother with a mixture of pity and resolve. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I'm not going to argue with you, Rob," Ethan said coolly. "And I'm not giving anything back. I'm just going to show you who you're actually married to. I'm going to show you the monster living in your house." He tapped the screen and connected it to the big 60-inch TV on the wall via Bluetooth. "Ethan, stop it!" Tiffany shrieked, letting go of Rob and lunging for the phone. Ethan sidestepped her easily, like a matador dodging a clumsy bull. Suddenly, Tiffany's voice filled the living room. It was crystal clear, amplified by the surround sound speakers. "Move faster, old woman. You're cluttering up my space. If you don't get these dishes done in 5 minutes, I'm emailing page 24 to the country club." Rob blinked, confused, freezing in place. "What is that?" Ethan tapped the screen again. Another clip played. This one was from the hidden camera he had set up in the kitchen the day before. It showed Tiffany standing over me while I was crying over the sink. "Stop with the waterworks, Eleanor. It's pathetic. If you tell Rob I spent that money on the spa weekend, I'll leak the diary. Do you hear me? I will destroy you. I will make sure your son never looks at you the same way again." Tiffany went dead silent. Her face turned a sickly, pasty shade of gray. The tears stopped instantly. Rob stared at the TV screen, his mouth slightly open. He looked at Tiffany, then back at the screen. The color was draining from his face as the reality hit him. Ethan played one last clip. It was just audio, but it was the dagger. It was Tiffany bragging to her friend on the phone when she thought no one was home, laughing as she poured herself a glass of wine. God, the old hag is so easy to manipulate. It's actually hilarious. I just threaten her with that stupid secret and she does whatever I want. I locked her out in the snow last month. Literally threw her out in 10-degree weather. And she didn't even squeak. As long as I have that book, I own this house. Rob is clueless. He thinks she's just going senile. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Rob slowly pulled his arm away from Tiffany. He stepped back, looking at her like he was seeing a stranger. The blindfold had finally been ripped off, and the light was blinding him. You locked her out? Rob whispered. His voice was shaking, cracking under the weight of the betrayal. In the snow? That night I found her on the porch. You locked her out? You told me she wandered off. Rob, honey, it's not what it looks like. Tiffany stammered, backing away, her hands up in defense. They manipulated the recordings. It's AI. It's fake. Ethan is a tech genius, he faked it all. He hates me. He's trying to frame me because he wants your money. Stop, Rob said. It wasn't a yell. It was a command, low and guttural. He turned to me, his eyes filled with tears. Mom? Is it true? Has she been blackmailing you this whole time? I looked at my son. I saw the pain in his eyes, the guilt of letting this happen for so long. I took a deep breath and walked down the final steps. Yes, Rob, I said softly. She found my diary 5 years ago. She said she would ruin our family name if I didn't do what she said. I was so afraid you would hate me for my past. I endured it because I love you. Rob closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He walked over to me and hugged me. He held me tighter than he had since he was a little boy. I could never hate you, Mom. I don't care about the past. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I was so blind. He let go of me and turned back to Tiffany. His face was stone cold. The sadness was gone, replaced by a fury I had never seen in him. Pack your bags, Tiffany sneered, trying to regain control. Is that what you're going to say? You're kicking me out? Fine. I'll take half the house. I'll take half your 401k. You can't just throw me out, I have rights. Rob stared at her. Oh, you're not just leaving, Tiffany. He turned to Ethan. Call Miller. Ethan nodded. Already on the way. He's 2 minutes out. Tiffany froze. Miller? Who is Miller? Why are you calling people? Sheriff Miller, Ethan said, checking his watch. My old college roommate. The chief of police for this county. Police. Tiffany laughed nervously, but the fear was creeping back into her eyes. For what? Being mean to my mother-in-law? Being a bad wife? That's not a crime, you idiots. This is a domestic dispute. The police won't do anything. Extortion is a crime, Ethan said. Elder abuse is a crime. And theft, I added. My voice was quiet, but it rang through the room. Everyone looked at me. Even Ethan seemed surprised. Theft? Rob asked. Mom, what are you talking about? I took a deep breath. This was the second part of the nightmare. The part one hadn't even told Ethan yet because I was so ashamed. She didn't just threaten me to keep me quiet about her behavior, I said, pointing a shaking finger at Tiffany. She stole from me. Rob, do you remember your grandmother's emerald jewelry set? The necklace and the earrings? The ones valued at $24,000. Rob nodded slowly. Yeah, they're in the safety deposit box at the bank. You told me you put them there for safekeeping. I lied, I said, tears welling up again. I didn't put them in the bank. She took them. 3 years ago. She found them in my dresser. She took the entire set. When I confronted her, she told me that if I reported it to the police or told you, she would release the diary immediately. She blackmailed me into becoming an accomplice to my own robbery. Tiffany's face went white. Pure ghostly white. She started backing toward the kitchen door. She's lying. She's senile. She lost them. I never touched her ugly jewelry. Don't move, Ethan barked. Just then sirens wailed outside. Blue and red lights flashed against the living room window, painting the walls in chaotic colors. Car doors slammed. A moment later, the front door burst open. Sheriff Miller, a big, imposing man in a tan uniform, walked in with 2 deputies. He looked at Ethan and nodded, then looked at the tense scene in the living room. Ethan, Sheriff Miller said, we got your call. What's the situation? We have a situation involving extortion, elder abuse, and grand larceny, Ethan said, pointing at Tiffany. My sister-in-law has been blackmailing our mother for 5 years. We have video and audio evidence. And we have a new development. She stole $24,000 worth of jewelry. Sheriff Miller turned to Tiffany. Ma'am? Is this true? No. They're lying. They're crazy. Tiffany screamed. She was losing it now, flailing her arms. Check my bank accounts. I don't have the money. I didn't sell anything. We don't need to check your accounts yet, Ethan said. Sheriff, check her car. The trunk. Under the spare tire. I saw her hiding a velvet pouch there yesterday when she thought I wasn't looking. I didn't know what it was then, but I bet I know now. Tiffany lunged for the door, trying to run past the deputies. You can't search my car without a warrant. Actually, since it's parked on private property owned by Rob, and Rob gives consent. Sheriff Miller looked at Rob. Search it, Rob said. Tear it apart. The deputies grabbed Tiffany and held her while Sheriff Miller went outside. We stood in silence for 3 agonizing minutes. Tiffany was hyperventilating, muttering to herself. Sheriff Miller walked back in. In his hand he held a dark blue velvet pouch. He walked over to the coffee table and dumped the contents. There, glittering under the chandelier lights, lay my mother's emerald necklace and the matching earrings. They were breathtaking and they were undeniable. I was just keeping them safe. Tiffany stammered. I was going to give them back. I swear. Safe under a spare tire? Sheriff Miller asked, raising an eyebrow. Ma'am, that's grand larceny. And with the blackmail threats attached? You're looking at serious time. He pulled out his handcuffs. The metal clicked ominously. Tiffany Hayes, he said, spinning her around. You are under arrest for grand larceny, extortion, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can, and will be used against you in a court of law. Rob, help me, she screamed as the cuffs clicked onto her wrists. She looked at her husband, pleading. Don't let them take me. I'm your wife. I love you. Rob walked up to her. He looked her dead in the eye. There was no love left in his face, only disgust. You don't love anyone but yourself, Rob said. And don't worry about the house, or the money, or the assets. I'm filing for divorce in the morning. And with these criminal charges, you won't get a dime. You're leaving this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. Nothing. Rob, please, she wailed as the deputies dragged her out the door. Get her out of here, Rob said, turning his back on her. We watched through the window as they shoved her into the back of the squad car. It was the most satisfying sight of my life. The flashing lights faded into the distance, taking the toxic cloud that had suffocated our lives with them. The house was suddenly quiet. But this time it wasn't a heavy, scary silence. It was a peaceful silence. Rob slumped onto the couch and put his head in his hands. I'm so sorry, Mom. I failed you. I was supposed to protect you. I sat next to him and put my arm around him. You didn't know, Rob. She was a professional liar. But you stepped up when it mattered. You believed the truth when you saw it. Ethan walked over to the fireplace. He was still holding the diary. You don't need this hanging over you anymore, Mom, Ethan said gently. This book? It's the past. It has no power over you anymore. The only person who cared about it is sitting in the back of a police car. Burn it, Rob said, looking up. Burn the damn thing. Ethan struck a match. He held it to the frayed edges of the blue notebook. The paper caught fire, curling and blackening. He tossed it into the fireplace. We sat there, the three of us, watching the flames consume 40 years of shame. We watched the secrets turn to ash and float up the chimney, disappearing into the night sky. I looked at my boys. Rob, the provider who had finally seen the truth, and Ethan, the gentleman, the detective, the savior. I realized then that my house wasn't made of bricks and wood. It was made of this: loyalty, justice, and love. I was finally free. My home was mine again. And I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes silence isn't golden. Sometimes you have to make some noise and trust that the people who really love you will listen. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold and believe that karma always catches up to those who deserve it, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We have new stories every week. Thanks for listening, and remember, always trust your gut and cherish your family.